they've also been quite forward-leaning without actually acknowledging they are forward-leaning about it.
The options are essentially stop providing services or do it for free.
The economy is a system that was designed. We can redesign it to get the outcomes we want to see.
Actually, this wasn't inevitable. You had a choice about what you gave your money to, and you chose to keep your promise to landlord.
It is quite devastating to see this current government absolutely trash what has been a really good track record with disability.
The complete lack of investment into Te Ao Māori.
What is the top priority for that $15 billion? The government says the top priority for that $15 billion is tax cuts.
But it's not fair that a religious group like Destiny Church stands outside a school. If it was any other protest group, parents would not accept that.
Hello. Welcome. How goes it?
It's Friday night, and everyone knows what that means. It's time for Behind the Walls.
It is. And I'm actually really excited because that thing worked. We just tried using a new piece of technology that automatically plays our intro countdown thing. So it worked. So I'm happy. I'm very happy with that.
I'm taking the lead on the first part of tonight's show, and Paul will be taking the lead on the second half. So
yes. So should probably point out to everyone that's watching that we will be finished by 9 o'clock, because I know there's a whole bunch of people who wants to jump over and watch BHN's interview with Sam Cedar, which completely want to do that myself. So we're going to keep a tight rein on it tonight. We're going to make sure everything is like boom, 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 done, super easy. But before we do that, I should make sure that we say thank you to our sponsors who have joined us up on YouTube. It's been incredibly helpful. It paid for our subscription to Canva this month, which was very, very useful. And if people want to be a member, it's super easy to do that on the YouTube channel. So really appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's very much appreciated. Right. Should we jump into the first interview since we've got lots to get through?
Yes, so here's our first section. Take it away, Paul.
All right. Did I forget to put music on there?
Yeah, you did.
Look, I do a million things in a day. I can't always remember a 7-second piece of music. I'm sorry.
Anyway.
I was busy humming, Paul. I don't notice these things.
Appreciate it, Peter. Thank you.
Tonight, I'm joined by Nick Ruane, Dr Rebekah Graham, and Peter Reynolds. It's so good to have you on to talk about disability tonight, everybody. So, for those of you who haven't watched us before, how about we all go around and introduce ourselves very, very quickly.
Well, I'll kick off. Thanks, Blake. I'm Nick Ruane. I'm involved in quite a few things. I have, kind of my many hats, but and been involved in disability service provision, disability rights, our DPO movement, and I think you're right. There is a lot going on at the moment, so it's a good time to be talking. We've got a superstar panel here tonight, led by yourself, Blake. So it's really great to be here tonight. So looking forward to the discussion.
Rebekah.
Kia ora koutou. Have shifted my office into the living area for reasons involving children coming back home after leaving home. And now, because it's 8 o'clock at night, my teenagers have magically decided it is time to potter about in the kitchen, which is very inconvenient.
Of course.
I couldn't believe it. Anyway, I am here representing Parents of Vision Impaired, and we've just come off our annual parent conference over the weekend, which was fantastic to connect with other parents and just have a really good time supporting each other. So, lovely to be back into the fray.
Peter?
Thanks, Rebekah and Nick, and thank you for the welcome, Paul and Blake. Peter Reynolds is my name. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the New Zealand Disability Support Network. Been in that role for 3 years. All up, spent about 20 odd years involved in health and disability support services across various institutions, starting off with DHBs, and I think they were even cheese in my day when I started, and involved with NESCs and all the other acronyms we can possibly think of. But yeah, it's, they say the three certainties in life are death, taxes, and change, and boy, have we seen change over the last 12 months, and are still likely to see it over the next 12 months.
So, Peter, I'll start with you since you're the newest member to our panel. What have you disliked the most about what Minister Upton has done over the past, let's say, 9 months or so?
Disliked?
Yes.
I guess I'll answer your question the wrong way to start with. I don't have a lot of opposition with what the minister is trying to achieve. I have some big issues with how it's being achieved, and I think that's where the problem lies for me.
And how do you,
living within our means? We realise that government has limited budgets, but they've got plenty of money to give landlords, discounts and taxes and what have you. But one of the lowest percentages of GDP investment in disability support just doesn't quite make sense. The sort of changes that they're making, things like freezes on residential care funding, freezes on packages of support over 105k, and some of the draconian rules that were introduced in March, they're silly. And we need to be a little bit more principle based, and we need to be a wee bit more focused on, the documents that we've got in place that we live by, enabling good lives and the UN Convention and others, and do the right thing by people. And right at the moment, I feel that that's not happening. While I represent an organisation that's focused on providers, at the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve the same thing for those people we serve. And that's doing the best we can for disabled people who require our support. And when you get policies and decisions from not just politicians, but from officials as well, that get in the way of that, then there's something dramatically wrong.
Mm-hmm. Rebekah, would you like to reiterate anything?
I think, look, it's just been a hell of a year. And as a parent, it has just destabilised. Like the minister talks about wanting to stabilise disability supports, and nobody is saying that's a bad idea. But what has happened this year has destabilised us as families and as parents.
Yep.
And it's been incredibly difficult having all these changes suddenly out of thin air imposed on us. And so not only did we have all our disability support suddenly upended on 18th of March, the changes subsequently have been really ad hoc, inconsistent, and it's left, I mean, I'm quite a competent, articulate, bloody-minded sort of person, and I'm quite capable of advocating the shit out of things. And I am just some days sitting there going, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm allowed to spend the money on. I don't know how to provide the supports my daughter needs. I don't know if we're allowed to do this. What about this? What about that? And that's hard. That uncertainty is incredibly destabilizing. Yep. And it means that, like, thinking beyond just me, for our parents coming off the back of our conference, there isn't the same investment into parent capacity building and to developing parents to think beyond just what they need right now. And I know, because of the work I do, and Peter will know this too, that parents need to have a vision for their disabled child beyond just meeting their basic needs. They need to have a vision for a life that exists beyond that. And if you don't have that vision, you're never working towards it. So you end up accepting mediocre, half-assed, half-pie services service provision, ideas. When someone tells you, oh, we can't do this, you just shrug your shoulders and go, oh, okay. Instead of going, no, that doesn't work. No, that's not what I want for my child. No, absolutely not. And digging your heels in and making things change. So that worries me. That worries me a lot. Yeah. That was a rant. Clearly that had been building for a while.
Nick, would you like to add anything before I move on to the next question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think one of the images that's going to stick in my mind for a little while was when I was at the NZRDA conference. One of the other things I do is a national board member for New Zealand Riding for Disabled, and we had our national conference earlier this year, and I went around and spoke to our members, many of whom are parents as well, and they placed their young kids into Riding for Disabled, and I just am stuck with the memory of parents and members coming up and talking about the uncertainty of not knowing whether they'll be able to book their young people into riding lessons the next week, because they just didn't know. And for many of them, they were booking their young people 6 and 12 months in advance. And that's just how it was happening. So there was just a huge level of uncertainty and not knowing who to contact and not knowing what was happening, because it's just a significant part of their life. The structure and the routine about going to riding once a week, once a month, sometimes even 5 days a week for some parents with their young people, and yeah, I just away from that really the actual impact that you had.
And Nick gone again.
Microphone's playing up there, Nick.
And what's that?
I say your microphone was playing up for a second there.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, and the other aspect was the lack of involvement of disabled people in all of this process. And because, I mean, Whaikaha is our ministry. I mean, we fought for 20 years to get this ministry established. And then all of a sudden, it's been basically, nobbled. And so that, for me, was really astonishing. And also the lack of involvement in the process. The review was really galling for many disabled people. So those are some of the reflections that I had.
Rebekah, I'm going to come to you. So what were the main things you noticed talking to people at your conference last week?
We had a great time, and it was just so nice to talk to other parents and to debrief and to laugh and cry and have some drinks and do all of that kind of peer support stuff. And I really noticed coming home, I thought, gosh, very few parents get that. Like, we get that because of the support of the blind sector and the intentionality of the blind sector in developing parent capacity and a bunch of stuff. But most parents don't get that. They don't get to be part of a community. They don't get to have peers they can do this stuff with. And that ends up eroding parent resilience. It ends up eroding the capacity of families. And unless there's an intentionality there to invest into families, you end up with nothing. And that has stuck with me quite a lot, that, we fell into this community 10 years ago, and yeah, we don't get together a lot, but you only need a little bit to keep you going. But for people who don't even have that little bit, it's harder to keep going, and it's harder to keep advocating, and it's harder to keep pushing back, and it's harder to keep insisting on a good life, and it's harder to keep insisting. Like, for us, school this year has been incredibly difficult. And for some of our families, that's an ongoing issue. And it's that peer support and capacity building that keeps you pushing in and keeps your feet under the table and keeps you going to these meetings and keeps you saying to the many paid professionals who are at the table in your meeting, going, no, that's not acceptable. No, that's not okay. And when I reflect on that, I think, gosh, it just becomes easier as time goes on to shrug your shoulders and go, oh, okay, I don't have the energy to fight anymore. I'll just accept this mediocre outcome for my child. And that is, that's kind of what I've been thinking on this week.
Yeah. The next question's for all of you, but Peter, I'll start with you. How does it make you feel when months on the minister continued to deny that there has been freezes when there clearly has?
Look, there's a few political shenanigans going on. She does use the word freeze, so I'm intrigued to think that she doesn't feel there's a freeze in place. She doesn't like using the word cut. She claims that there hasn't been cuts to services. Well, there have. If it looks like a cut, smells like a cut, tastes like a cut, it's a cut. Hello. One of the things I did recently was to contact this new DSS unit crowd in the Ministry of Social Development and ask them the question, if we put aside the anguish just for a second and say, well, okay, all of these things that are going on, all of these decisions are designed to save the government money, how much has been saved since these changes have been made? You've got the first 3 of 7 recommendations that have been implemented. So what does the savings look like? And I got the response to an Official Information Act just the other day. We don't know. Now, I don't know if there's a swear jar on this program, but that's absolute bullshit. You don't institute stuff like that. You don't institute things like this without that being the top line report you would put through to your minister to let them know if the strategy is working or not. And they're telling me they don't know that. That's not good enough. If I was advising Minister Upston just at the moment, I'd be saying, look, you actually need a new set of officials, quite frankly, because clearly they're not doing their job.
Rebecca?
You probably saw my facials. I have a terrible poker face, so, I don't play poker. You probably saw me just going, what? How can you not know? Like, what? What?
It's just dopey. Let's go through all this pain for reasons we don't know.
Do you have anything to add in terms of the minister continual lying, Rebecca?
I think the minister is very competent. I think she has consistently been across a number of issues, and it doesn't make sense to me that she doesn't know.
Okay. Nick?
I'd have to agree with Peter that this minister is very competent, knows what she's doing, very politically astute. Excuse me.
See, we're choking everyone. Our plan tonight is to choke everyone to make them laugh so much that they start coughing.
My apologies. Yeah, sorry.
The only way to keep people's spirits up.
That's about it.
Are you all right, Nick?
I'm fine. I just got a bit of a tickle. Yeah.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
Well, we'll move on. What's your guys, if you have all seen it, what's your guys' reaction been to the letter that David Seymour put out recently regarding rare disorders and the STAR program? Oh boy.
This is a minister who has perhaps correctly identified an opportunity to do something about the breadth of unnecessary bureaucracy that we all have to live with and put up with, whose first response to that is to set up a new ministry with a new bunch of bureaucrats and a new set of rules and a bunch of special forms that have to be completed. Again, did he not look in the dictionary to see what the definition of irony was? But this is just a classic example of it. And I had great faith in what Seymour was doing because he was highlighting an area that I've been involved in myself in the early childhood space. But then the response just didn't seem to make sense. So I think his letter tends to fall into that category. From an education perspective, I think he gets a very much could do better in his report card.
The thing that worries me, and I'll come to you, Nick and Rebekah, in a second, is that he's trying to penalise. He goes around the bush without saying it. He basically is going to penalise people for not going to school that can't go to school, that have rare disorders. It's disgusting, in my opinion. Can I get a brief comment from Rebekah, and then I'll go to Nick?
We're all worried about Nick's coughing now. I was horrified. I mean, it just showed such. I'm not sure whether it's deliberate ignorance or just uninformed ignorance, but there was a huge level of ignorance there around the reality of what disabled children, parents of disabled children, education in schools looks like. It just completely negated any of, firstly, the medical realities of you take the medical appointments you've got and by goodness, you make them. And it doesn't matter if you've got 3 different appointments on 3 different days, boy, you get to the hospital and you meet those specialists and you do what you can to get your child the healthcare they need. And what Seymour seemed to be saying was, you will be penalised for that, because even though those absences are justified, you will still have an investigation opened into you into those absences. And then the school has to do a bunch of paperwork to show that they've investigated. Like, it's a whole bunch of very unnecessary work for the school and unnecessary pressure on the parent, and it doesn't change any of the outcomes. Yep. And the other thing that I'm aware of is that for a lot of parents of neurodiverse children, there are not the same accommodations in place to enable neurodivergent children to attend the school full-time. There does not seem to be any implementation of the kinds of supports and training and funding and all of those things that would actually enable full-time attendance for neurodivergent children. So it seemed very unnecessarily punitive without actually doing anything to improve the outcomes and without providing any of the supports that teachers and teaching staff and school communities and boards of trustees and parents have been saying we need.
Yes. And Nick.
All right, I'm back. Back from the dead. Okay. I'm wearing my ECE voice t-shirt today because there is a lot of concern around what's happening with our early childhood sector, our primary sector, in terms of what's going on with a lot of the reforms, the planned reforms. But we do have serious problems with what's happening in terms of guaranteeing access for our disabled rangatahi and young disabled kids in terms of getting into school. Just the right to education is not guaranteed in Aotearoa, New Zealand. There's a lawsuit at the moment that's been taken by IHC to test that. So this type of thing further provides a further barrier in front of guaranteeing access and guaranteeing the right to education. But I'd make a further comment that usually this type of thing would be managed by the school. You know, if a young person had a medical appointment, that type of thing would be managed by the school. So if we've got now the minister sending a letter over the top of the school saying you must do this or you must do that, that's actually pretty heavy-handed, really, when most schools would have managed that situation practically and with a lot of sensibility around what was actually happening on the ground, and just understood what was happening, and done so, and just saw it for what it was rather than making a big deal out of it. So I just see this as a huge overreach for no real purpose, when schools are handling this situation every day, and have done for years.
My final question to to all of you would be, what would you say to encourage and I want a short statement from all of you. How would you encourage the minister to appear on this program? Who wants to go first?
Tell her it'll save her money, and tell her that she needs to think about nothing about us without us.
And to you, Rebekah?
I think the minister has talked a lot about how she is consulting with the sector. And it isn't always clear who she's consulted with or who she's talked to. And I think that coming on this program and being able to talk openly and honestly with yourself, Blake, on this podcast would actually give some reassurance within the disability sector that she isn't just talking to a hand-picked few.
And to you, Nick?
Yeah, I think any time that you don't go out and either correct the record or make a statement, things get said and potentially mistruths get told, or things get blown out of proportion. So I think my suggestion to the minister is come on, have the conversation, and either correct the record or make the statement around what's going on. Have the conversation with Blake. He's not as scary as he might appear.
I don't know.
and just have the discussion, because it will set the record straight. It will enable the government position to get out there to a very wide audience, and it may actually just dial down some of the rhetoric on it.
Well, thank you for joining us this evening. It's been a pleasure to sit down with you and have a wee chat.
It's been a pleasure to spend that time having a chat with you too, Blake. I'm just not sure about Paul. Strikes me as being dodgy.
I totally am. Absolutely. These things behind me, I stole them all. Every single one.
Anyway, thanks for joining us, guys, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Thank you for having us so much.
Great to catch up.
Bye-bye.
That was absolutely brilliant. And because they're running to a schedule and Georgie is very patiently waiting in the waiting room, I'm going to press the button that puts up her card and change our background as well, because I know that there's at least a couple of people in the audience who are having a bit of issues with the change in color background. So let's see if I can do this all at once. And I cannot guarantee I put sound on this either. So you might want to hum along to a tune or something in case I didn't. Okay, I didn't put sound on that one. That was terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Oh, dear.
Sure, Georgie? You're on mute.
There we go. Great start. Kia ora. Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you for being here. Big week for you.
Yeah. Wednesday was massive. I was the lead organizer for the Kirikiriroa Hamilton rally. So I was pretty knackered after Wednesday.
I can imagine. What was the turnout like?
So in the Tron, we had, it's hard to judge crowds, but I think it was just over 300. So a really good turnout for kind of midday on a Wednesday. In Wellington and Tamaki Makaurau, the crowds were pretty big. They had thousands get out there, which was really, really cool to see.
Yeah, I was at the one in RTS Square, and I'd say
How are you?
maybe 2,500 would probably be my estimate.
What did
Like,
you think of it?
I really enjoyed it. I have the problem when I go out to these things now that I get stopped a lot. And so it's kind of hard to concentrate on everything that's going on all the time. And like, I love talking to people and meeting people, but I sort of miss bits and pieces of the speeches at the same time when that happens. But the crowds were really enthusiastic and really passionate. And there was such a diverse range of crowds for the one that we had here. You had all of the unions being represented. You had a whole bunch of different genders, ethnicities, ages. It impacts everybody, I think, in different ways.
It does,
what's
yeah.
happening at the moment. So I was really impressed with that. And then I think it was something like 4,500 down in Pornicki. Like, Wellington had a massive turnout.
Yeah.
What do you think of the media coverage?
The media coverage, I think, was what I expected, which was that it would focus on Auckland and Wellington. I wasn't expecting anything for Kirikiriroa, and I wasn't surprised when we didn't make it. But I think, I guess, what do I think of the media coverage? I think I always want more, right? I saw that on RNZ they had a bit of a live stream going, which is good to see. But I'd love it to have been front page in every paper on the Thursday, but it wasn't, unfortunately.
For you, what was the important message to get across at this?
Well, the important message is that this is the most anti-worker government that we've seen in a really long time. I think that's one thing, actually, that the write-up in the Waikato Times, a huge chunk of the write-up was Ruane Hamilton's response, which I think, they're always going to go to the local MP and get their view, and cool. But I think it really didn't reflect the concerns of the people that were on the ground and the concerns of the workers. He was
Ryan being out of touch with workers, I am shocked.
He's a business owner.
I can't believe that.
Yeah, so I think, his comments really got to me a bit, actually, because it did show how out of touch he is with workers. So, the main things, there's so many things, and we know so many of the things that this government is throwing at us. I guess some of the main things, the anti-worker things that they have thrown at us so far, was that repeal of fair pay agreements, which was absolutely massive. And I think fair pay agreements, it's kind of hard. It's a harder piece for people to get their heads around what it looks like. But essentially, the reason that Australia has better wages and you can get paid more in Australia than you can in New Zealand is because they have an award system that got scrapped in New Zealand. And fair pay agreements was a step towards getting to an award system, which would mean that we had comparable wages. It would automatically lift the pay of some of our lowest paid workers. The 90-day trials is just diabolical. So now any employer can fire at will within 3 months of employment. And then the other one, the one that Ryan touched on, was the contracting laws. So you may have seen that the unions just won the Uber case in the Court of Appeal about whether Uber drivers were contractors and employees. And it's a really important distinction between contractors and employees, because if you're a contractor, you miss out on all of those employment rights like annual leave, sick leave, holiday pay is part of your pay, but there's so many things you don't get. And so it's really important to distinguish whether someone's an employee or a contractor. So anyway, we won that case to say that Uber drivers were employees, which means they would get better employment conditions. But what we've heard from the government is that they're going to take that through legislation to make it easier to become a contractor. What Ryan said, and I don't want to talk about him very much, but what he said in the article was that all of these things was going to create more security at work, but it's going to just do the opposite for workers. If you're getting fired at will, you've got no job security, you haven't got a fair pay agreement, then there's continues to be a race to the bottom where businesses are just competing for cheaper and cheaper contractors, which means paying their workers less and less. It's not going to benefit our workers in any way. And that was the crux of what we were about on the day. The other part of it, you would have seen that we had heaps of people in the healthcare sector there, heaps of NZNO, New Zealand Nurses Union members there, which was really good to see, and the tautoko from the teachers as well. These cuts in the public service, when you speak to it not just affecting, unions or workers, it affecting everyone, these cuts to the public service is just cutting to those core services in health and education, which we know affects every single person in our community.
See, I think with Ryan, the reason that he's so keen on contractors is because the one contracting job he had, he couldn't get fired from, because as a city councillor, you're technically hired like a contractor, and you technically cannot be fired no matter how much you fuck things up. It makes sense that he thinks it's a nice, safe, and secure job.
And we see that in Hamilton City Council at the moment, with one of their councillors who is just, doing diabolical stuff, but still there.
Yep, can't get rid of them. That's just how the law works.
Yeah, democracy.
Oh, yeah. Yep, absolutely. Hey, do you have any questions on the topic?
Hey, look, I just want to... Hi, Georgie. I just want to touch on your point around 90-day trials, because even though I agree with the fair pay agreement, they should return, and I agree with a number of other things, I'm actually supportive to a degree of the 90-day trials, and if you allow me to elaborate, I'd like to explain why. Because as a disabled person, I actually, as someone that does disability advocacy, I actually promoted when, because as an advocate, I always work with whoever's in opposition. So last time it was national, and I worked with Mr. Bishop to try and get these trials back on the basis, because when we had caregivers that weren't up to standard, it was very hard to get rid of them. Now, there's an argument that, they can be suitable for clients, and yes, that may be correct in some cases, but if they work for a big company, like MD Care or Access Community Health or whatever it might be, there are going to be times where they aren't suitable and they need to get out cards so they don't get taken to court. So I like it from a perspective of for the disabled community. Now, I don't like it in other settings or many other settings, but I think it's a really important tool to have for the disabled community. And I just wanted to get your response around that.
Yeah, really interesting point. And I think it's important that businesses and organizations are able to have productivity within their organization, and that if there are staff that are problematic, they are able to go through a process that they need to make sure there is disciplinary action or whatever that might look like. I think the concern we have with 90-day trials is that although there are a lot of employers who are doing an excellent job with their workers and their staff and looking after people, there is that point there where a bunch of employers will take the opportunity to discriminate against employees, whether knowingly or not knowingly. We've all got those internal biases of what they're doing, and what we don't want is people to be discriminated against unfairly, not because they're not doing a good job or not meeting the goals they need to be meeting within their job, but because of other discrimination against them, which does mean that they lose their job. We want people to be able to go into jobs and have job security so that they can support themselves and their family at home. And if people are at risk of, say, in 3 months' time, I might not have a job, which means I'm not able to continue to afford my rent or my mortgage or whatever that is, that's the real concern for us, that people's livelihoods are affected. And if employers don't have to have a reason that they could fire someone because of something that they should be protected under the Human Rights Act, in legislation at the moment in the Employment Relations Act, there are a number of things that employers can do, and also collective agreements if people are under them. There's a number of steps that employers can do in order to take disciplinary action against an employee, or able to go through a competence a process with them. And I personally, as a union official, as someone who's worked with workers in employment disputes for a long time, I think those are sufficient, and that we're able to address any issues that employers have with staff through our existing legislation, while also giving staff opportunities to not be discriminated against. So I guess I feel like, in summary, I see your point, and I think in a lot of scenarios, everything, right? And when it comes to any kind of employment, and in a lot of scenarios, it's totally all good. And the employer's great and understanding, and the employee, and they work together, and it's all good. But it's in those few cases where the employer is not that nice, or doing things that aren't great for their employees, that really means our workers suffer.
Totally agree with you. My concern is just that like my community that don't have the outlet that now do, where they're not getting, where they're less at risk of getting sued for, a disgruntled caregiver who didn't do the right thing and
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Got sacked. So yeah, that's how I feel on that.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean, and that's a good point. And then there's all the lawyer fees and stuff. My answer to that is join your union. It's not as as expensive as a lawyer.
Yeah.
and we should probably remind people as well that they get to enjoy this long weekend thanks to unions.
Yes. Happy Labour weekend, everyone.
Happy Labour weekend. What's your reaction to the question that was thrown around in the House on, must have been Wednesday, at Brooke Van Velden, the Workplace Relations Minister, when she was asked whether or not she felt her government was the most anti-worker government, and she said no, because we didn't force vaccine mandates on people.
Oh, right. Yeah, I did. I saw that alluded to in the news, but I didn't hear that exact quote. Yeah, I think it's two completely different issues, right? It was the previous government responding to a pandemic. And I think even the previous government accepts that there was some, mistakes made, as there always are. But I think that was responding to an immediate health risk, which was trying to look after all people, which is this, whereas what the government's doing now is dividing by looking after the wealthy people and leaving workers and poorer people behind. What are your thoughts on it, Paul, on that comment?
I did a very nice long video today about how absolutely insane she is, and how the ACT Party did a really good job during the election of trying to hide how full of crazy their party was, and they've just gone and undone it all completely by letting her open her mouth.
Yeah, it's nutty, isn't it? And I don't know, I found out the other day, maybe I was a bit late to the party on this, but I found out that Casey Costello is a first-term MP and a minister, and just that kind of lack of experience that we have sitting in those senior positions is really scary. It's awful having an ACT MP as the Employment Relations Minister. She just wants to deregulate everything, which is obviously not good for our workers and our workplaces. The one we're watching at the moment is the changes to health and safety law, and that deregulation. They've used that road cone analogy of we're getting rid of the road cones. What we've seen from a union perspective is that the more regulation you have in workplaces, the less injuries you get, the less people die. People are still dying at work in this country, and that should be something we're aiming to completely eliminate. And this is really going to take a backward step. Protecting employers by not spending as much money, but with huge detriment to our workers.
The red flag for me was that, Brooke is the one who turned around and said, I think we put too much value on life during COVID, but we want to change the Health and Safety Act. It's a really hard balancing act there. Holiday pay is also something that's sort of on the the chopping block with them at the moment. They want to do an accrual of holiday rates instead of a standard assumption of what you're going to get if you work part-time. I'm not sure if that's going to be the same for full-time workers or how that's looking at working at the moment, but have the unions had any information on what that's looking like?
Yeah, the holiday pay stuff has been going on for a while, and I think it's really complicated, and I don't fully have my head around it and the way that it's accrued, etc. But historically, after the last few years, it's been discovered that people have been underpaid their holiday pay. So trying to fix that needs to be the priority instead of looking at cutting holiday pay or restricting part-time workers in any way. The same as the cutting of sick leave for part-time workers. That's a real shit one for me, because we know that the majority of people who are working part-time are in caregiver roles or have existing health issues or whatever it is themselves. So if you're in a caregiver role and you're looking after kids and elderly people, you might be working part-time, doing so much work for our society, majority of them women. And now by cutting their sick leave, it means they have less access to be able to look after people and further discriminate against that unpaid work that is so important, but we don't value. And Blake, you might have a view on that from a disabled perspective of that reduction of sick leave for part-time workers, because a lot of the disabled community would work part-time.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw our earlier conversation, but we were talking about disability, and one thing we didn't get to was the cut for the minimum, the wages for the disabled people is just appalling. And the fact that the minister keeps denying that there's a problem is not good. The fact that some are earning as low as $2 is apparently ridiculous.
Yeah, really unfortunate. That the thing that got me around those disability changes was the changes, and you'll know more about this than me, but but the changes that meant there was less autonomy about the way that people and families were able to spend their money. And I've heard that that's had a huge negative impact. I was chatting today actually to a parent of someone who talked about that respite care and being able to choose how that having respite was spent, and now not having that choice, and what an impact that's made on her and her whānau.
Yeah. Sounds like a terrible way to run a country.
It does, doesn't it? Well, hopefully it only goes on for another 2 years. Or even 6 months, because 6 months is when we're doing the changeover, right?
It is, yeah. Oh, it must be about 5 months now. Coming up 5 months. Yeah. Hopefully.
The question is, will David throw his toys?
Yeah, well, I think it'll be David that throws his toys more than Winston.
Do you?
I think Winston, I know what Winston's like, and I know everyone's expecting Winston to throw his toys, but David is the one that will stamp around like a little baby if he doesn't get to push the Treaty Principles Bill.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's so much to talk about. Oh, we could just go on and on.
I know. We have 3 minutes left, so one last question for you. What advice do you have for people out there who are really concerned about these changes that the government's bringing in to the workforce that's going to impact workers the most?
Yeah, cool. Well, join your union. We need to grow our movement. We're the biggest sort of organisation of people in this country, and if the more we grow, the more of an impact we have. But also get out there. I think now is the time to take action. So, we had our event this week, and there'll be more events coming up. I know there's a hikoi coming up in response to the Te Tiriti o Waitangi, or the Treaties Principles Bill. And so getting involved in that, because that people power and that power on the streets does really make an impact, and we can look at what an impact it's made before, and the more people we get out and the more conversations that we're having contributes to us helping to change the government next time and restrict the damage that they can do in the next 2 years.
And don't forget, you've got all weekend to think about why you've got all weekend. Like, that's a really, I think, a powerful tool. very powerful tool. Was the protest actually lined up to be because of Labour weekend? Was that the thought process and the timing, or was it just more of a coincidence?
I don't know, but it works bloody well, didn't
it? Yeah, I think it did. It was brilliant. Georgie, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's really appreciated. And thank you for all the hard work organising everything down in Kirikiriroa. It was really cool to see the turnout. Really glad to see that it went well for you.
Yeah, and you too, Paul and Blake. Thanks for all your hard mahi.
Oh, I just sit in front of a computer and talk. That's the easy part. You guys are the ones actually out there on the ground floor dealing with everything.
You're very welcome.
Awesome, Georgie. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Catch you later.
Bye.
See ya. See, I think I'm doing really well on timing so far because I have 7 minutes of news. I have timed this. So we're going to jump into the news. Then we're going to have 3 minutes left. There better be music on this one. There better be. It's done in a separate way. But we will watch the news now, unless there's anything you want to add in to fill in like the extra 2 minutes that we've got on our schedule so far.
If there's not music, just watch it along.
If there's not music, then I'm going to be really awkward because there'll be no other sound either. But there was sound when I tested it, so that is fine. Right, let's jump into this week's terrible, terrible news. Hello there, kia ora, and welcome to this week's news. Te Pāti Māori co-leader Debbie Ngāwera-Paka, seen here chilling on the couch, wondering genuinely how your day was, says that she is, quote, gutted, obviously fucked off, end quote, with a decision from Spanish company Blue Float Energy Limited, which has withdrawn its plan to set up an offshore wind farm off the coast of Taranaki, citing the planned offshore seabed mining being put through fast-track legislation as part of their reasoning. The wind farm itself would have produced enough energy to power 440,000 homes, or the combined number of dwellings in the Waikato and Wellington regions. In Wellington this week, the Office of Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet announced an end of funding to Whenua Taurikura Research Centre, New Zealand's flagship research centre looking at violent extremism, set up in the wake of the March 15 attacks. This comes weeks after the closure of the Disinformation Project and the closing of investigative journalism project Stuff Circuit, all of which had focused on links between the rise of disinformation and violent extremism risks in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Said David Seymour and Winston Peters, seen here agreeing that the tail should wag the dog, in one curiously very, very rare photo of the two of them in close proximity to each other. Good. Maybe they'll stop telling people voting for us is dangerous now and we can embolden more racism. Common sense in people. The Minister for Land Information, Chris Penk, seen here wondering if there's something spicy on the menu at Bellamy's, like white rice seasoned with salt, has been asked to make a call about returning the name Petone to its original Te Reo Māori name of Pito One. The New Zealand Geographic Board, which is in charge of place names, has made the recommendation after years of exhaustive research that showed early settlers started calling the area by a bastardised version of the original Pa site name. While the local council has voted to accept the change and the overwhelming majority of public feedback was in support of the idea, it's being seen as doing something supporting Te Reo Māori is clearly scaring the minister, who is yet to make a final decision, and there is no time frame as to when he may make the call, then be overridden by the leader of the ACT Party saying it's not to his liking, and then publicly saying he's chosen not to go ahead with it due to the expense of, updating signs and email signatures. Invercargill Mayor Nobby Clark, seen here showing how he likes to greet people, has threatened to stop contributions to local media outlets as a threat over reporting the costs of his 3 Code of Conduct complaints, which have cost the city more than $79,000. Citing the fact that he believes media just want to regurgitate that issue instead of looking at the positives of his tenure, he has told the Otago Daily Times, the Southland Express and Stuff by email he has been left no option. If only they'd been more like that top-notch What's On Invis outlet who publish racist Garrick Tremaine cartoons and let Nobby say whatever he likes on regular segments. On Thursday, nearly 30 flights scheduled to fly in and out of Wellington Airport were cancelled due to the extreme weather, which saw wind gusts of up to 140 kilometres per hour and 350 homes lose power. While NIWA had in place an orange wind warning for the region, Wellington City Councillor Nicola Young, seen here discovering that poor people exist and can't just be banned, once again blamed Tory whānau in a press release that's been spread across all mainstream media that said the reason she believes climate change is real is because she clearly can control weather. That's an evil superpower all left-leaning politicians have. So this is clearly all her fault. So Simeon needs to step in and appoint me as a commissioner. Speaking of Wellington, Newstalk ZB senior political reporter Barry Soper, seen here looking for some friends, has come under fire for an opinion piece claiming all perceived issues in Wellington under both current Mayor Tory whānau and past Mayor Celia Wade-Brown come down to the STV voting system in use for local body elections. That's despite the fact that the first round of voting in the last local body elections, whānau won more votes than the next two opponents combined and would have won under a first-past-the-post system. STV is a rank-based system where unused votes are reallocated based on voter preference and tends to deliver a much more representative outcome, leading to more diverse elected bodies with broader ranges of experience and skills. So it's no surprise that the right-wing media pundits don't really seem to be fans. And in a set of really coincidental coincidences, after a week of running attack pieces against Wellington City Council and Wellington Mayor Tory whānau, where right-wing commentators and public figures have been able to uncritically comment on everything, Stuff and the Post owner Sinead Boucher today announced that she will be part of a completely bipartisan group of totally not biased, civic-minded individuals, including some of the ones she platformed uncritically in her publications, called Vision for Wellington. For more information on this, see any of this last week's videos on how the media sets the public discourse into practice called agenda setting. The Ministry of Health has been forced to apologise to Associate Minister of Health Casey Costello, seen here in an actual interview she gave to Rupert Murdoch-owned Sky News in Australia, claiming woke is evil destroying our country, for not disclosing a conflict of interest with one of her staff members involved in Costello's tobacco law reforms. That conflict, the staff member is Labour's health spokesperson Aisha Varal's sister-in-law. While Deputy Prime Minister Winston Peters tried to use it as an opportunity to attack the Labour Party, Te Whatu Ora says the responsibility sits with them as the person involved has followed correct procedures declaring the conflict. Said Costello, well, sure, Nicola Willis's dad is an oil and mining magnate. Shane Jones seems to have regular dinners with fishery and mining groups on the fast track list. The Prime Minister owns several homes and changed the rules for the Bright Line test that he then profited off, and his sister-in-law works in the tobacco industry. Clearly, this is a deceitful action by the Labour Party and a terrible plot by the left to bring into question our actions, like the one that surrounds that mysterious tobacco-friendly smoke-free policy that just mysteriously showed up in my office, like a mystery. And finally, the makers of Wallace and Gromit have announced plans to team up with toy company Mattel to revive the internet's favourite penguin, Pingu. The new series will continue the stop-motion production style used in the original 1990s series, with Aardman Entertainment, who are best known for this type of work, continuing the adventures of South Pole-based Pingu and his sister Pinga. The series uses a made-up language for characters to communicate in called Penguinese, a somewhat coherent gibberish, with phrases like "noot noot," which should appeal to voter bases of both ACT and New Zealand First, who are somewhat fans of somewhat coherent gibberish. That is this week's news.
You're on mute.
Done. 3 minutes left to spare. Scariest thing about putting the news together was actually the fact that when I found the articles about Pingu, I don't know if you can hear the dog next door, but he's going mad. Found the articles about Pingu, they had to explain what stop motion animation was. So how do people not know that? It's not done with computers. It's done frame by frame.
You missed a good opportunity in your story, by the way. There was also a 2005 reboot
of Pingu.
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Well, there you go. I learned something new. I think we should probably wrap things up because we've got people who want to go and get themselves a drink, cup of tea, go to the bathroom before they sit down and watch BHN's interview with Sam. So it's certainly one of those things people can go off and do. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Learned a lot tonight. Any final thoughts, Blake?
We'll see you next week with Gary Payenda, and even though the name's wrong, it will be CEO of Rotorua Hospice, hopefully, but I'll confirm it later in the week. Jonathan Hager.
And we've also got a live interview with Francisco Hernandez, the Green Party MP from Dunedin. So people should tune in and give us their questions.
And we'll see you next week.
We'll see you guys all next week. Ka kite anō, press the buttons and let's see if the outro works.